shortly. The centering process, then after the centering process, putting a center hole in the piece. After that, opening it up and pulling it up.
Okay.
And so that if you follow those steps, you'll find it much easier. And I will, like I say, I'll hold your hands. So I'm going to take your hands and I'm going to actually pull a piece up so that you'll get the feel without having to just stand here or sit here and struggle and struggle and struggle. You begin to get that feel.
Okay.
Learning to throw is a sense of feel. Some people get it right away. It took me almost 3 semesters before I got it. Now I have to say, I didn't have a lot of help. I just said, here's the wheel, go ahead.
Right.
But you'll find that it works pretty well.
I'll give you the YouTube on this.
Oh,
We'll
thank
make it a
you.
movie,
Oh, great, thank
so
you.
if that helps.
The first thing I do is wet the piece a little bit so that it has some sticky quality, and then I throw it down on the center as close as I can so that it sticks to the base. Then I start by wetting it. I take this hand, feel my hand, pull on it.
Your hand?
Yeah. See how rigid my fingers are?
Okay.
Okay,
You have to, and watch my elbows and my arms,
okay.
because what happens is that you want to have your hand so rigid, when the clay hits it, it forces the clay to stay in one spot. In other words, I'm not pulling and pushing, I'm pushing and holding. I'm holding my hand gradually with my bottom 2 fingers. I'm coming up. The very tips of these fingers come up the side. Then I start by doing again, but I'm going to take this hand and overlap the other and press down and roll over. I might have to go through this for a few minutes to 10 minutes maybe. If I'm working on a big piece, I may have a heck of a time trying to center it.
So
So
you're
I'm
centering
pressing
it
down and rolling over.
Oh, okay.
So you're trying to get it centered? Or?
Trying to get it centered.
Okay.
Pressing down. Now, you can tell it's not centered at all. This clay is really shifty. When I say that, it's sort of really smooth and soft, and I like clay with a little more tooth. We call it tooth. It has a real fine grog in the body is good. Sometimes I'll take the sponge and I'll use the sponge in my hand. Very gradually pulling up. The top is getting closer. Some people throw a lot drier than I do. I like to throw wet. I'm rolling that hand over. Never release suddenly. If you do, the whole piece will jump off. You release very slowly. I'm almost centered. It's a little bit off. You want to get as close as you can. When you have a real soft body without tooth, what happens is the slightest little touch will cause it to be inside or out, a little bit of movement. And give me a little more water, please. Now that looks like it's close, but I wouldn't. Now I'm going to need a couple of other tools. I need a point, one of those needle points,
Oops.
and one of
Okay.
those wooden kidney-shaped, pieces on your left-hand side. Right there, there ought to be some, right in there, they're wooden, they're kidney-shaped. Kidney-shaped.
Will this work for your point?
Yeah, that'll be good for the point, that's fine. It may be in some other bucket or
Maybe,
something,
but
but
they don't seem to
there are
be
some
here.
around.
Here's the gym
Oh, here.
bucket.
There, this one?
That's it, thank you.
Okay.
I don't know if this is,
Oh, I didn't have to get you a new cover.
that's all right,
Oh, my
don't worry,
goodness. Wow.
no problem. I don't know if people, I don't know if this is really a kidney shape, but that's what we call it.
Okay, okay.
There are some that come to more of a point. These are called throwing ribs.
Ah,
What I can do now, sort of like a lathe. I'm a little bit closer to center, still not really centered.
and you can tell it's not completely centered because of the wheel, the way the wheel is looking.
By
It's
the
just
feel of
not-
it.
Yeah, oh, by the feel.
And I can see it.
It seems the wheel is not turning as perfectly smoothly as it would if it were perfectly centered. Because it looks, visually it looks centered, but when the wheel turns,
That's not too bad.
not too bad.
I would advise you to try to get at least that close. And you just keep pressing down and let the clay spread out. This could, if I wanted to throw a plate, I'd make a cylinder out this wide, and so I would just keep pressing down and letting it expand outward. But we're just gonna throw plain cylinders today.
Okay.
The next step, I take two thumbs and I press down on the center. Notice the speed is not excessive of the wheel. You can go too slow and you can go too fast. If you go fast, it'll come off center real suddenly. And if you're pulling it like this piece is going to collapse on me pretty easily unless I'm careful. I hope I get far enough before I collapse it to show you that you can get an actual cylinder. And if I don't collapse it, and if I don't make it too thin like I would if I were doing it for a job, if I were going to make, let's say bottles. I was going to make a bottle form. I would have to be sure that the clay was thin, or the wall thickness was basically the same all the way from top to bottom. You keep holding on the sides. My elbows are planted firmly on my knees. I'm releasing very slowly. Now, this is on center. It may look like it's a little bit, wobbly here. That's okay, because what I've done is I haven't leveled out that top.
It sure looks centered to me. It looks beautiful.
How easy that works. Now I like to you want to leave the thickness of the bottom of a piece about a ½ inch or more, sometimes more. If you want to cut a foot rim that's deep, you want to make a deep foot rim. In the beginning, I would just make maybe a foot rim that's 1/4 inch deep, and that the bottom be 3/8 thick. Now that's a guess. You can tell when you get your piece made, if say it's a bowl, if I wanted to check my bottom thickness, I just stick that clear to the bottom, put my finger down and then see how thick it was. Then when I start throwing again, I squeeze a little water so that I've got that, I'm not creating a little air pocket in there with the point, and allowing that to spin and then let the water in and then press my fingers down and hold, and it's all sealed again. Okay, so I continue this process. Now some people do this all in one process instead of 4, they do 3. They start by just putting their fingers in like this. I put my fingers together like this, and I'm pressing downward. Notice again my elbows and arms are fully extended on my legs, because your hand will wobble too much. Some of that clay came off. It's okay. I've still got it on center. And if I get a little bit off center, I'll be able to get it back on. I let it hold in one position for a long time. I don't pressure pull it up or down before I lift my hands off. I let it ride around a few times, very stable like. Now I've got, if you look in here, I've got the center off center a little bit, down in the bottom. That'll work out. What'll happen is, when I start pulling that out, it'll work. Now the clay is starting to fold over the edges. I want to bring that down and make that solid. I think I'm down far enough. Now I'm reaching in with those fingers like I did, but I'm pulling straight across the bottom towards me. And it feels like there's a lump of clay in there that isn't consistent.
Yep.
I'm going to take the water out of the bottom. It's not good to leave the water in there. If I can't get that centered, feels like I've got an air pocket. I do. Look at, see that little bump there?
Oh,
When it's this thick, sometimes I can save it. Now we worked that clay and worked it and worked it. And it should have been all right. When you get an air pocket, you sure you fill it with water. Third. And the fourth now is simply starting to pull up the clay. I may lose this one because I feel inconsistency down in here. Seems all right up here. Now I take my knuckle like this. Try that. You got to get that finger back here because this knuckle is what you're going to be using.
oh, get that
And the
finger
farther back this way you can get that knuckle.
Okay.
You don't want to get this finger into there.
Oh, okay. So,
You're going to be working like this. Okay. Then I lay this thumb in here, and I use this middle finger. Some of these fingers ride on the inside. I take that finger and overlap. I take a bite into the clay with my knuckle and try to maintain that same division of space all the way up. That's pulling up the clay. Notice the clay is on your knuckle. finger marks in the clay is a good thing. You see the ridges like this? Those are quality feel. They're kind of make it a personal kind of attitude. It doesn't feel like a commercial.
Right, right. Yeah, okay.
And so you keep trying to keep it in a cylinder form.
You're pressing with both your thumb and your knuckle then.
Now, I
Pulling
think
up
this
with your thumb.
I think this is sculpture clay. Your sculpture clay is a very smooth clay, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, there's no,
Do you need more grog in it for more growing?
Yeah, grog would have helped. When if you really get into this, you'll be buying a bag of clay yourself at Clay Planet, and tell them you want a throwing body,
Okay.
and it'll work for you better. In fact, I sometimes used to use, for special purposes, I'd make pieces that were a little bit more like sculpture. Actually, I'd make big pieces, 9 or 10 inches up, with 2.5 pounds of clay. You're ready for the next step, making forms.
Start with 3 inches.
Now I've got that back on center pretty well. Some potters, like some of the very best, Marie Wu and Takezu and a few others, like to pull pieces up on center and then just center them. Just pull it off center intentionally a little bit to make it more personal. And so like that wasn't made on a mold. That was made by a person. It's a subconscious feel that you have. It's a personality thing.
Well, they'll know I made it.
Yeah,
They'll
we kids do.
know that guy.
If it even gets ever sees the light
Yeah.
of day.
Now one of my fingers is,
Now these are the stabilizer fingers, right? And these are the pressure fingers?
they're both the same.
Oh. Trying to make it nice, yeah. That's
The-
yeah.
Now I got a little bit off center. But I got up a lot more, didn't I?
Yeah, went up.
I'm still worried about it. There's right in the middle down here, there's some real inconsistency, like it feels like the clay could tear. And when you have that kind of a feel, you know that there's something either in the clay
Right.
or that there's another air pocket. Now each time, if you don't lubricate it some, especially with clay that has tooth in it, the throwing body, you'll find that it will tend to tear on you and it'll lose its form. So you want to be real careful. You got to have enough room to get. Sometimes when I've got a tall piece, I'm doing this. I might be doing this, but it'll be so tall that you can't do, oops, what I just did. You can't do this. This is the beginning stage, and you can't have that support. So what do? I give myself more room, but I put my elbow down on my knees again.
We're stuck.
They're here. I'm going ever so slowly upward. You don't want to get too.
So this is you're saying is it loose? This clay is this where it starts to collapse, maybe when it gets thinner
When you
like
get
that.
when you get thinner is when it will collapse.
I got you.
You got to keep it wide enough so that you can get your hands in it. And if I think I've got too much moisture on the surface, a throwing rib is really good to use. Notice I have it at an angle. My finger is riding on the inside of the edge. of the outside piece.
Okay, we're gonna move this because we're leaving.
Hmm?
Yeah, I gotta go to work.
We're gonna move the case.
Okay, I, again, hope we'll get it bottom.
But how's that possible? If you take the same mass up, it seems like you won't have enough clay to make the top as thick.
Oh, it'll go as far as it'll go, and that's what you accept.
You know, I guess I have to do it to see what you're saying,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, like, for instance, if I know I'm a little bit thick, if I wanna take that off,
At the bottom.
I can take it off.
But you're pretty well limited where you're at right now, right? Because your wall thickness.
I am, because of the fact I haven't been throwing regularly. You don't ever forget the process or the feel, but your skill of being as thin as you ought to be with it. The goal is to make your pieces as thin as possible. And still maintain a solid, a form that has a feel of solidity.
Right.
So, okay, now I'm getting high enough.
Well, I see, you're moving the mass up again.
That's right.
That's what was my point. So you're bringing the mass back up to get a little more height. Okay?
Yes.
Great.
Now, this wouldn't happen. This kind of clay that came off with the throwing body would not happen.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick up some throwing body stuff to practice. I don't need to practice the hard stuff.
Leave the challenges for the teacher, huh?
Yeah, you do the hard stuff.
Now I want to dry this body out a little bit.
Okay.
I did watch one video, as far as I've gotten, and they not only pulled up, but then they pushed down. Did you ever do that?
Pardon?
On this one video that I actually watched, they pulled up and then they also pushed down periodically.
I don't do that
Don't do that,
down
okay.
business.
Mhm.
Because what it does is it wedges the clay more. Now, when I start centering, I'll press down and pull up, and I'll press down and pull up and extend it.
Okay.
I do that, but I don't usually in the throwing method.
Maybe that's what I was remembering, was the centering part of the process.
Well, again, you may find that there are people who will do that. Now, I won't go any further with the height, but I will try to make this into a form, knowing that this now is a cylinder, and the wall thickness is not too bad. It's a little thick in the bottom. It's about this thick, it's a little bit thicker than up at the top, right at the very bottom. Some of that can be taken away on the outside later if I want to. That's why these bats are so good. Just when it gets leather hard, we'll just take a wire and cut it off the bat, turn it upside down, and then we'll trim a foot rim on it.
When it gets a little harder?
When it gets leather hard.
Okay.
When you can handle it without it losing its form,
Okay.
but still soft enough that you can trim with a wire tool. It'll cut into it and take the excess off.
Good, then we can see you
All
trim.
right. See if I can do it. Well, I guess first I'm using my knuckle on the outside and pressing in on the out. From the inside, I'm pressing out. Now I'm pressing in. I'm going in.
Oh.
Uh-huh.
I'm starting to get a form. I don't want to let that bottom get too wet, but I let the water run on both sides.
Oh,
Okay.
Pressing out now,
Mm-hmm.
and now coming in.
I'm coming up a little bit. Now I'm starting to let up on the inside and pressing in on the outside.
You got yourself a bowl.
Notice I hold in one position for a long period of time. So I've got a kind of nice flowing form there at the beginning.
Well, that would be a major accomplishment for me right there.
Now I want to work this further on the inside, so I'm going to do a method called choking.
So you're just kind of squeezing it evenly?
Notice I'm squeezing inward.
Mm-hmm.
I'll teach you this later. You don't have to worry about doing this yet.
Okay.
I want you to really work on the cylinder. Now, if I have an uneven top like this,
That's it.
just trim it off. I'm a little bit thick at the top, and that's good, because I want to do some more. Now I'm going to do this. See my knuckles? I like, you don't have to learn this either right now, but I don't want to give you too much, but I'm just showing you what's happening. So now I'm bringing this in further. Now that see, I'm beginning to form a wobble.
It was interesting when you first started that the form wasn't circular anymore. It was becoming some more squared off, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It resumes its form somehow with your touch.
All right, it's a little bit thick here. We don't want to get it too thin, because it'll collapse now.
Now, if you had a clay like that and you felt it getting close, would you wait an hour or two and then resume?
No.
It wouldn't work. Wouldn't.
I don't know. I just wouldn't.
Yeah.
I would want to be able to do it,
Finish it.
to learn the process so that it can really, what happens is in the beginning is this is teaching you the feel, and if you wait, you won't know. If you reach that stage again and you've got something, all of a sudden it'll collapse on you, you may not. But if you go fight your way through this, you'll learn to keep it. You'll learn
Okay.
to make it work. Okay, ooh, I didn't put any water on it. Whenever I lubricate that outside, I don't want to get too much on the inside, but we have a stick with a little tiny sponge on the end of it. We can stick down in there and get, if we want. Okay, let's just bring this in further.
Nice.
It always seems to get irregular at the top. I lay that on my thumb, press through and pull off. I can feel that thickness. There are times when I want to make a bulbous form and close the whole thing. I can actually close that whole thing.
Right.
Oh.
Or make a ball even.
Yes.
Yes.
In other words, I make that rounded more.
Right.
But what happens is when you do close something in, you have to poke a hole with a point someplace, or when shrinking, it'll crack because of the air.
But you could close it all that much, like even just one little hole with a sharp instrument like that would be enough. You wouldn't have to poke multiple. Okay, wow.
No.
Plus, when you fire, you need a place for gases to escape, don't you?
Yes.
Wow.
See, it's all in the fingers now at this stage where
I like the ridges, I like the fact that it's not perfectly smooth going up, that it's
Yes.
got some character.
I might turn that under more. And now I'm going to take the water off the surface. With throwing clay, you won't have to do this as much. This clay melts much more rapidly than throwing body.
And I like that it kind of rises, some of these ridges kind of rise, is that considered aesthetically okay?
It's okay, although one of the things in the beginning that you like to see the person doing is getting the perfect curve. Why? So that you know you can do it. Then you can put that personality in. Like now, see, I can put any finger marks in there I want. Now, if I feel that this bulges a little too much, one of the schools in the East, which one was it? Years ago, it was the top school in the East. They used to have a taste test, and I'll never forget it. One of the examples was you had to select from pictures which one was the best, and they showed two pots. They were identical. One had the tiniest little bit of a flat spot about there, and that was the one you rejected. That doesn't hold true in real life, but they just wanted to see if you can, get me a little bit of a paper towel, please, just a half a sheet, just tear it into a little small section about 2 or 3 inches.
Is that what you want?
Yeah, take one of, no, that's right, you got it, you got enough. Just tear one of those off. Yeah, give me the small one. Thank you. Okay. Now, up there, someplace in the containers, there's a piece of chamois skin. You don't need it. You don't need it now. But the chamois skin, yeah, we'll have to cut that up and give you each a little tab like this so that this is what you normally use, but you can do it with paper.
So that would be used with chamois.
But chamois is much better and much easier. You were talking about throwing with something on the inside. Now, if I were Marie Wu, I'd probably, when I did this, I'd probably go back and just give it a little kick,
Make it crooked?
make it unperfect.
Oh.
Now, I'm showing you the mechanical process right now. Like I say, later, when you feel comfortable with that you can get a good form and that you can take a certain amount of clay and decide that this is as high as you can throw it, that's when you can start working, and you should start working to make pieces. Too often my students used to, and the young college kids would want to make a piece. They didn't care whether it was good, as long as they could make something.
Yeah.
And I can understand that, because you you feel so elated when you come up with something at all on the potter's wheel, because you're gonna have a lot of failures. Now I'm just sort of doing stuff that I can do later. When I take this off, how am I going to put this on end and turn a foot rim on it? I'll take a jar or a bottle that's just a little bit narrower than that, center the jar and put the piece in upside down, and then center it until I get it just centered again, and then we'll
That's
start
when it's
turning the
leather
foot
hard.
rim. Hmm?
That's when it's leather hard.
Yes,
Okay.
that's when it's leather hard.
And you'll put it back on the wheel to trim? Or you can just do it?
After it's leather hard, we'll take this form and we'll set it aside and let it dry. We can't put plastic over it right away because it would mar it,
Oh,
and you wouldn't want to do that.
okay.
And so,
So you're gonna wait for a few hours or a day or?
if you leave this out for a while in the sun, not out there, but I mean in the windows, they don't allow us to go
Yeah, we
outside.
can't put it on there, that's been a big deal.
Oh, really?
Well, starts to look like Tobacco Road.
Ah, look, oh, look at that.
Oh.
Skinny.
Why are
To
you
So
doing
that you
that?
can see
The thickness.
the thickness.
Oh.
See, I got a little bit thin right down here, but it's always a little bit thick right here, and that part,
Tells you.
Oh. Wow.
that part is where I would trim off on the outside to fit the inside like that.
Right, right.
And there's enough thickness here to turn a foot rim in without being too thin. Beginners usually tend to make the bottoms a little bit thin sometimes, and then when they turn the foot rim, all of a sudden they cut through it and they've got no bottom at all.
Right. Well, that's gonna be,
You got as much
So
to do
you
with it.
got
But
plenty
this-
of bottom there.
Yeah, I've got plenty of bottom. Now, if I had this other clay, I think I could have gotten that even thinner, more like this or more like this area from the thinnest part, let's say. More this thickness. And more even all the way down. I was really fighting this.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Well, it turned out great for having to fight through the whole.
because the clay is just not throwing clay, you're saying? You felt,
It's a sculpture clay.
right, it's just not,
It's not the kind of clay that, some people like a lot of tooth in their clay body. Potters normally make their own clay.
right,
They buy the materials and they make a body that they like. The one that works for them in throwing. We don't have that kind of luxury. We don't have a pug mill or anything to make
Right.
clay with. However, you can buy clay. And
Right.
and they, not only that, the clay that you buy from the Clay Planet, when it's extruded from their extruders, it comes in one chunk with no air pockets.
That's right.
so you can
So
just
what
go
you can
use
do
it.
if you have a block of clay like this, you can cut it into a series of blocks so that then you pat those blocks into round balls
that's it.
and you don't have to wedge.
Uh-huh.
But I like to get reclaimed clay and I like to really work
Right.
at it.
Uh-huh.
So that gives you